Good evening, campers, streamers, and babysitters, and welcome to our raw reaction review for Final Destination Bloodlines.
Plagued by a reoccurring violent nightmare, a college student returns home to find the one person who can break the cycle and save her family from the horrific fate that inevitably awaits them.
Well. Another franchise with a sixth entry. And I can say, I think very few people, could say this. But actually, in one of these horror franchises, the sixth entry is my favorite of the entire franchise. That's Friday the 13th.
This is going to be a hairy turn. Hang on.
But normally, once you get past the trilogy, that's when things can get a little dicey. And, with a franchise like Final Destination, man, we talked a little bit about the first one in a video we did earlier this week, as well as kind of reminiscing slightly about some of the sequels. We haven't really gone too deep into those, but this one we can say, I think for both of us, we were intrigued. We were excited. There was a little bit of that nostalgia that kind of got us a little bit more pumped up for this. But, going into it, I think we had to really just resign ourselves to the fact that six entries in horror franchises, in any franchise, and with that title, Bloodlines, usually not working out the best.
Acknowledge me.
Luke, what were your thoughts going into Final Destination Bloodlines?
I think we've had enough time removed from the franchise. I think the last one was 2011, maybe, and we hadn't seen anything for a while. So, if this had come out, in 2013, easily met with an eye roll because, boy, were we just beating a dead horse at that point. But going into this one, it did have my intrigue. This wasn't at the top of my list. This wasn't something I was overly anticipating. It was definitely on my radar. But yeah, when you put something like Final Destination Bloodlines, usually that's kind of, it's like the Pumpkinhead franchise, a lot of other ones where they put that little tagline there. And you're just like, you get your guard up a little bit. So going into this one, I really just wanted to have some fun. I was excited about that trailer where they showed the cookout. I thought that was rather well done. Everything else I stayed away from. I did see the photos of the CGI kind of the big building, in the skyline.
Yeah, they were using that all over the marketing.
And that got me a little more hesitant because this franchise, the later installments in this franchise, even in some of the earlier stuff, there's some CGI that gets questionable, pretty dated stuff, and kind of, is a little bit of a mark in terms of being able to really rewatch those and enjoy them. So this one, I was hoping we weren't going to have an overabundance of CGI. I was hoping they were going to go more so the practical route and really just wanted to have some fun. I wasn't asking too much from Bloodlines.
I don't think anybody was. I think that most of us went in there, again, like you said, it's been so long since we've had another installment in this franchise. So you do have the rose-colored glasses, or maybe our defenses are down a little bit. So, you can kind of go to it. Some would say that's what happened with Halloween 2018 for a lot of people. But, I guess we're wrong about that. Who knows? But no, I can say as a whole, after walking out of Final Destination Bloodlines, that I really enjoyed my time with this movie. This movie isn't anything super special. It's a Final Destination movie. That being said, it is a far better, far more competent Final Destination movie than either of the last two installments, where the last two installments feel like those early 2010s, like we're just riding the coattails of this name and we're just here to do yearly installments of just death after death after death. There's not much thought put into how can we innovate this franchise. And although I don't think the innovations are anything that's going to be like, wow, we need like more Final Destination like films right now, like this franchise is revived, I think that the creatives behind this one surprisingly hit a nice balance between we're going to tell a little bit more of a story this time around, and we're going to give you the gruesome Final Destination cartoony fun that you're looking for.
This one, going back in terms of the Final Destination franchise, coming out of that fifth installment, it was easily becoming kind of like Saw, where we were getting them so close together. Wasn't really much about the character or really the instance other than that the inciting incident at the beginning and everything that happens and death follows you. And we were just getting into some cool kills. That was really what it was. It didn't feel like they were trying too hard. Just like, we got to get another Final Destination out there. We got to have some cool kills, mostly leaning on CGI, unfortunately. And was really just kind of, we're really tired of seeing this. So I'm glad we took this break to kind of re-rack, and we were hoping for something different. And when we look at Bloodlines, I think there was a solid attempt to really take this idea. And when we talked about Final Destination in the video on the channel, I mentioned that I think Final Destination is really lucrative idea. You can really get some mileage out of it if it's done right. And I think Bloodlines, when you look at this film, there was an attempt here in terms of developing some connective tissue, some characters that you're going to resonate with. It's not deep character work, but we do get some fun twists and turns in this film that I don't think anyone was really expecting, because we've kind of grown to know what the Final Destination franchise has become. And I think this one wanted to do something different. The creatives behind it wanted to try and build a foundation. So we had that when we were getting into some cool kills, and just that idea of how is death going to come for these characters. And I think they did this rather well here, where we weren't asking for too much. I think they overserved us a little bit in a good way in terms of those characters.
I completely agree. For me, walking out of this movie, the standout piece, and I think it was the most surprising piece, is that I really enjoyed the characters in this movie for the most part. Now, is everybody as equally handed with care as, like, are they all equal? No, there's certainly going to have characters in here who are kind of throwaway, but even then, most everybody gets a couple of moments at least to be a person. There's really only one, and dealing with the title Bloodlines, obviously we're dealing with a family here. If you've seen the marketing, you kind of get what's going on. There's only one family member, I feel like, who's completely kind of just there to die. You know what I mean? Everybody else kind of has a moment. I really, really love that. And I think my favorite sequence in the entire movie, for two reasons. One, for a returning character, which we'll discuss on its own here in full brief, but the moment with these two brother characters of Eric and Bobby just really blew me away with just how much I actually cared about them and were interested in their sequences. They do a lot of legwork to actually make these characters relatable and fun. And like you said, there's some twists and turns in here that actually got me excited, because we had talked yesterday before even seeing the film and everything. But you had only seen one teaser or something about it. And
Yep, the cookout scene, that was the only thing that I had seen other than the stills of the skyline of the big building.
Yeah.
And that one, got my guard up, but I thought the cookout scene was rather well done. So, building those characters around this family, I said, let's have some fun. I think we did.
Absolutely. And where I was going with that was just the teaser trailer is this setup for a kill. And I was so eye rolly by that, because it was just why are you making the very first thing we see? You're just giving away an entire kill in the movie. And I won't spoil anything for anybody, but when I saw how this all plays out in the theater, it was one of those moments where I'm like, ooh, you know what? I like what you did. I take back what I said. That's the smartest thing I'll say about this movie is, although it's not incredibly innovative, we are still dealing with a Final Destination movie for Final Destination fans, there is just a bit more attention to detail and a bit more of man, we came to this project with an idea. It wasn't, we came to this project because it's an IP. And I think that served this film immensely.
Yeah, when you're looking at established properties like this, established franchises, they really have that blueprint all laid out. And that's what that later half of the franchise has really become. It just really became a kill reel where we're not getting much with the characters. We establish everything probably within the first 10, 15 minutes, honestly. And then we're just off to the races of all these deaths and an overabundance of CGI sometimes. Where Bloodlines, yes, we're still dealing with a Final Destination film. So we're not, it's not a huge variation, but easily an attempt to subvert some expectations, to keep the audience guessing and to keep them intrigued, not necessarily just with how is the kill going to play out, but when is it really going to happen? I love those elements to it because it does, it's a tired saying to say it keeps you on the edge of your seat, but it really does here.
No, it
This was
does.
the first one, first Final Destination in a very long time. Even some of the ones that I love, I don't really have that intrigue of how is this really going to play out, but they did it here in Bloodlines. And it really does keep your intrigue and it keeps that momentum going, not just from the kills perspective, but from what they're really going to do with the characters. And the moment you're talking about, that is an instance where it's like, you think they're going for a jab and they end up hooking you, and it's like, okay, I don't know what the rest of this film's going to look like. And yeah, it's not a huge variation in terms of storytelling, or we're getting into deep rooted issues or anything like that. But there's a solid attempt to develop some characters and that kinship between this family. And I was rather excited to see where this was going to go. And honestly, some of the kills became just a bonus at some points because I wanted to see how they were going to tell the story and some of the twists and turns we were going to take.
Absolutely. And they've gotten into this habit, I feel like, with some of these movies of just like all these kind of mid 2000s slashers that we like to dog on and stuff on this channel, or I like to dog on a lot, of just like we just have shitty people who are there to die. And this absolutely like gets points for just not doing that, just saying we're not going to do that, we're going to actually put some pedal to the metal and do some legwork here. And I think that's definitely why we're seeing such like love and so much praise for this film, because even though we're all kind of like, as horror fans, everybody I could say has been pretty positive. Like, yeah, I'm looking forward to Final Destination Bloodlines. Like, even if the movie sucks, it's going to be fun. That's the attitude. So the fact that we're going in and we're getting more than that is cool. Now, the other thing that I want to talk about are these deaths, because the thing that we talked about in our video was, this is like the big selling point for this franchise at this point. You know what I mean? Like the concept in the first movie, there's a story there, it sells it, it's good. But like as you go along, it's less about that. It's more about just the kill reel, like you said. This movie, I think, although definitely, unfortunately, leans into a lot of CGI to facilitate some of the deaths, I at least appreciate the fact that we didn't get so bonkers out there Looney Tunes with some of these kills. Some of them were really unique, really well thought out, into the fact of, I don't think if I'm writing a Final Destination movie, I would have thought of a very specific kill that's in this. It's very creative. You don't know what's going to happen. And it gives you this sense of, dude, I actually feel like everybody is on the table here in a meaningful way. And that's great. Like, that's an awesome way to feel when you're watching a Final Destination movie, let alone any horror film.
And we reminisced about the original Final Destination and our love for that, and how it has that perfect balance where there's some CGI in it, but a lot of practical stuff going on. And that's really what you hope for. I think a lot of fans from 80s horror and that kind of what you just love, the nostalgia aspect of it. And unfortunately, with a Final Destination concept, I don't think you're going to escape CGI. So sometimes you have to find that perfect balance because there's always going to be CGI and some big set pieces here. And it's just a product of the time, I think, when we got into, 4 and 5, and I think that certainly was, we felt like we were milking the concept where it's like, just throw CGI at it. And there wasn't really any redeeming qualities. Where Bloodlines, yes, there's CGI. There's a couple of kills in here that was like heavily CGI, but they really did make an attempt to find that happy medium between doing some practical stuff, which really does complement it and kind of lets you, kind of give a pass to some of the CGI in it. And when we look at the actual family here, I love the approach, because when you said, we always have these characters that we hate, and that's really where they're doubling down on, where there's this, again, a kinship, a familial element here. And I love that the approach was, when we're laying out death is coming for everyone. I think, in terms of the characters kind of absorbing that and being open to it, it felt a little different to me. And I love that aspect of it, because when some of these characters meet their demise, you really feel for them. I think there was an element here where it's like, it was like, yeah, they're getting murdered. It was like, oh, I really feel bad that
Yeah.
X character is gone. I really wanted to see them find a way out of this. And yeah, some characters are stronger than others, but I think all of them maybe a couple or maybe a little annoying more than others. But overall, I think the character work here is really setting that foundation. And then when we get to those kills, they mean a lot more.
Oh yeah, especially my standout kill of the film here. I think would you agree that it's
Yeah,
the one?
we're
Yeah,
on the
it's
same
it's
page.
it's it's the set piece. It's the one, and it has the most meaningful deaths. And it's like, oh no, like we're both
It's a
sitting there
gut
like,
punch for sure.
oh, like man, because they do such a good job. And I will say, normally humor bothers me a lot, and you guys know this. I bitch about this a lot when it comes to the Gen Z kind of humor or the modern kind of humor that we've been getting a lot, where it's trying to walk that line of being goofy and nostalgic, but it almost feels like a parody of itself. There's a little bit of that in here, but it didn't completely bother me. There's one scene where I thought, okay, you're going really extra here, but even then, the setup and how that all happened is so fun. And the fact that I didn't know at this point how this was going to play out. And when it does, it is also pretty interesting. It's pretty satisfying, although a bit CG. I was like, wow, that's actually that's not ruining the experience for me. And I think that's definitely a mark that needs to be mentioned when that stuff comes up. Because normally something like that comes on screen and I'm just immediately like, any goodwill you built up, I'm starting to check out, because it just sucks me into the fact of, this feels like a product that is just being made to try to get people's butts in seats. And I hate that, you know?
And I think the comedy here works, and I don't say that often in horror films, but I
Mm,
think the way that Bloodlines establishes itself with the characters and just with the kinship that we do have, I think when we implement the comedy, there were some elements in here that I actually chuckled because it was like, okay, that's a great line, that's a great dynamic. So a lot of the comedy in here worked. I think they found a perfect balance between horror and comedy because they're using comedy to complement the
mhm.
horror elements to here. And then when it does pay off, I think it even amplifies it even more. So I think, they laid that solid foundation with the characters, with the comedy, and then we got what we came for with a lot of the intriguing kills here because even those were creative. And when we go back to Final Destination being a lucrative idea, I think Final Destination Bloodlines really makes the most out of it, certainly with the kills and subverting some expectations and where everything's going to play out. So honestly, I had a lot of fun with this film.
Yeah, I agree. And I think we've buried the lead long enough. We can talk about it before we give our ratings. But I think if you're a horror fan, if you're a fan of this actor, it's no secret this is Tony Todd, I believe his last project. There might be a handful that pop up here and there, but this is his last probably real big on-screen appearance. And the scene, I was worried about it. I didn't hear anything about it. I had stayed away from all that, and I was so like, man, how are they going to do this? Because with it being his last moments, I didn't want it to just be throwaway. I didn't want it to just be like, oh, there's Bloodworth doing his usual thing. And he kind of does that, but this feels so cathartic. This feels like we're stopping the movie in the best way possible for Tony Todd to just like talk to the audience and just really not only inform the characters about the information that he has and kind of really tie some things together that have kind of been mysteries of his character for so long, and then for him to just almost say goodbye to all of us. Like, I'm not gonna lie, I didn't like tear up or cry, but it's a very emotional and very cathartic sequence with Tony Todd, and I applaud these filmmakers. I applaud everybody who did that, because you just don't see that very often. And I really feel like there was an understanding of, he's doesn't have a lot of time left. He's coming in, he's doing this. It's probably exhausting, and you can kind of see it. And it's just handled with so much care and dedication that I can say that they should be very proud of how they handled this cameo.
I was getting misty eyed. That one, we got a chance to see Tony Todd in stream last
Yeah.
year. And anytime you hear Tony Todd, Hatchet, anything like that, you get excited. It's such a he always does fun cameos, but
And he
this one,
crushed it as Venom in the new game, so it's like the guy's got a voice like no other.
the dude is just a phenomenal actor. I think underrated just because of Candyman and the horror space in general, but he amplifies any role that he does. And I was excited to see him. I'm always excited to see him, but I'll tell you, it was a knife in the heart when you hear his voice for the first time in this film, knowing that this is we're getting a send off here, and it's an absolute top tier send off of any character in a franchise. The dialogue that he delivers, the performance, while it's small, the connective tissue that we get there. I mean, my gosh, I'm eager to see this film again. That scene, my gosh, I love the delivery. I'm gonna watch that scene over and over again. It's just the absolute perfect send off for any character in any franchise. And man, Tony Todd is gonna absolutely be missed. But to have a film of this quality to be a send off, I don't think you could ask for anything better.
100%. And again, I'm just saying this because I know there's going to be people who are like, oh, how could you praise this so much and everything? Because, like, again, that's the beauty of the horror space. And I think where we are as a channel, and I can say as a community with some of our closer friends, is like with horror, you always have these like levels of it, you know, where it's like, yeah, Final Destination, it's goofy, it's fun, it's just popcorn horror. It's there to have a good time. But the fact that we're walking away from this one not just saying, well, there's another Final Destination. The fact that I'm walking away saying, hey, Final Destination 6 or Final Destination Bloodlines is something I could catch myself watching again. It's something that if I get the hankering for Final Destination movies, I'll be looking forward to seeing that. And again, just the I guess the forward thinking from the filmmakers, the people behind the scenes when it comes to Tony Todd's scene, and just how honest and just very, again, cathartic is the best way I can say it, that this movie feels. I I I give them all the praise in the world. Like, honestly, I'm almost to the point where I don't have words to really describe how that made me feel. It was again misty-eyed feeling, it was emotional, it was nice, and overall not how I thought I was going to be leaving Final Destination Bloodlines.
Yes, and as we get into ratings here, and you're talking about how can we praise it so much? And there are different levels here. This isn't like on par with we saw Bring Her Back
Yes.
and Sinners, things like that, where those films are just in a different category. I feel where Final Destination Bloodlines, they had a great handle on the concept. They know what the film is. They know they're supposed to be bringing some fun, but they just didn't focus solely on the fun and the kills. They made an attempt to lay that solid foundation with their character work, give an appropriate and more than adequate send off to a horror legend,
An
and
icon. Yeah.
just do right by the franchise, get it back on course, so we can say, we don't need one every year, but if there's an attempt, there's a lot of fun to be had, there's a great idea out there. Final Destination is more than worthy to dust off the franchise and bring it back to the theaters. So for me, this is a solid recommend. This is a great fun time at the theater. This is something, when I talk about films, when you put on at certain times, this is a film you put on when you're passing out candy on Halloween, because
Oh
it's
yeah.
so much
Just
fun.
fun.
It's a good time. It's a great time at the theater. It's gonna be a great time to invite some friends over and just have a fun time watching some fun kills and getting some solid character work. So solid recommend from me.
Absolutely. And I'm going to follow up with also a very solid recommend on this one. I thought for sure walking into the theater, I'd probably be at a worth a watch or proceed with caution. But the fact that we got so much, it's definitely something I want to tip my hat to. And I agree with you. You said it as we walked out of the theater. You put it absolutely the best way. We do not need one of these every year. Don't take this, please, Lionsgate. Don't take this as, okay, now we just need to get, you know, men for hire behind the camera here, and we're just going to start throwing out Final Destination movies every summer. Don't do that. Only do this when you have an approach like this, when you have an idea. And I think you're going to see that's better served. And I guarantee you that, like, you give this another 2-3 years, especially with leaving off in a positive taste with this one for most fans. I bet you if you do come at it and you come at it with some care again in a couple of years, you'll see just as much, if not more, return. I think you'll see a lot more people fondly looking forward to the next installment. So let's hope for that. Part 7s don't always pan out, but yeah, no, definitely that's 2 solid recommends from us. And definitely let us know down below, guys, what you thought of Final Destination Bloodlines. If you've gotten a chance to see it, maybe you were on the fence. Maybe this will push you to go spend your money and check it out. I hope you enjoy it. And yeah, we got a lot of great stuff up on the channel right now. So like Luke said, we just reviewed Bring Her Back, the latest from the guys behind Talk to Me. So that was extra creepy. Check that review out. And yeah, lots of other great stuff. It's been a busy week. It's been a crazy week. We got another review that's coming up shortly for a movie that boy,
Painful.
what a watch. So I'm excited to at least get that one out for you guys. But yeah, other than that, it's been a busy week and we got more coming this summer. So until next time, I'm Dylan Newell.
And I'm Luke Janesco.
And remember, stay scared.
Do the hard shit, gonna do it live. Cause Splattercast kick it every day they live. Splattercast, gonna slash your ass. 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 Splattercast, gonna slash your ass.